Thank you very much, Megan, for the very informative and concise overview of the regulation of the ballast water management at international level. Now, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Atef Urgi from SPA RAC to provide an overview on invasive species in the Mediterranean Sea and its link with the ship's ballast water management. Mr. Urgi, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Wanda. Could you please ask for sharing my presentation?
Yes, Dora, please show the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I would like to give a brief presentation on the non-indigenous species and the Barcelona Convention, but this time is from a biodiversity perspective, which means that the Barcelona Convention, and particularly with SPA RAC, we're dealing with non-indigenous species as one of the most important threats to biodiversity in the Mediterranean. First, I will try to give you a presentation of SPA RAC, what we are doing, and the legal framework that deal with non-indigenous species in the Mediterranean. And I will show you then some information about non-indigenous species and data that we are collecting, and that shows exactly the status of non-indigenous species, the pathway, and the situation in the Mediterranean. And I will finish by some key message that we could take for the updating of the Mediterranean strategy. So, as brief presentation for RACSPA. So I'm working for RACSPA as a program officer, and I'm in charge of conservation of ecosystem, but which means I'm in charge of four regional action plan. 3 of them are concerning habitat, and 1 concerning the species introduction and invasive species. Next slide, please.
Dora, please, the next slide. Thank you.
Yes, just a brief presentation of, for those don't know exactly SPA RAC. So SPA RAC is a center, a regional activity center belonging to the MAP system, the Mediterranean Action Plan. We are a brother with the RAMPEC, and we are mostly focusing on marine biodiversity in the Mediterranean. We are based in Tunisia, and we are hosted in Tunisia since 85, and we have reached now our let's say mature age, and we have more than 30 years of conservation effort for the Mediterranean. Next slide, please. So our main goal is the overall conservation of the marine biodiversity, and for that we can resume our activity in 7 block of activity. The one is to make inventory and mapping of the component of biodiversity. We develop research program to fill gaps in our knowledge. We elaborate and implement conservation program mainly through regional action plan. And I will explain to you what mean regional action plan under the SPA RAC SPA BD protocol. We also monitor and assess the status of biodiversity, and also we use the tool of marine protected area to conserve the marine biodiversity and we contribute a lot in the enhancement of the capacity building of the country in order to allow them to contribute in the conservation of their biodiversity. Also, we do a lot of activity concerning the information outreach and education, which is an important part in any conservation program. Next slide, please. Next.
Dora, please move to the next slide.
Yes. As I said, SPA RAC is the secretariat that assists the Mediterranean country to implement what we call the protocol concerning specially protected area and biological diversity in the Mediterranean, SPA RAC BD protocol, which was adopted since 95. It was a new one, taken into account all the development after the Rio de Janeiro summit, to take the conservation of biodiversity from species to the ecosystem. And this protocol have also provision which are legally binding concerning the introduction of non-indigenous species, and particularly the Article 13. And you can see that we have two main points. The first one is related to introduction, that parties should take all the appropriate measures to regulate the intentional and accidental introduction of non-indigenous species. And the second one is to implement also measures to eradicate when the species have already been introduced. And this is already legally binding. Next slide, please. In 2003, the contracting party also adopted what we call the Strategic Action Program for the Conservation of Biological Diversity in the Mediterranean. It's a sort of regional strategy outlining priority, objective, and activity to be undertaken at regional level and also at national level to implement the protocol from 2003 till for the next 15 years. And at that time, the issue of the non-indigenous species was identified as one of the main threats affecting Mediterranean marine and coastal biodiversity, and specific activity was identified to control and mitigate the introduction and spread of alien and invasive species, with the high and first priority rank in the list of the whole bunch of priority. And next slide, please. Which led to the elaboration and adoption at 2003, the first action plan concerning the species introduction and invasive species. The action plan is a regional strategy that outlines objective, priority, and implementation measure in different fields, as well as their coordination. This strategy is not binding like the protocol itself, but it is a sort of strategy that country are contributing at voluntary basis in order to contribute in the regional effort, whether to conserve species or to tackle such a threat to biodiversity. Next slide, please. Dora. Okay, so the action plan was, as I said, adopted in 2003 with a 5-year timetable and timeline, updated in 2008 and was updated in 2016. And this is mainly to introduce the adoption of the ecosystem approach in the map system. And as you can see, the main objective of the action plan is to promote the development of coordinated effort and management measures through the Mediterranean region in order to prevent, as appropriate, minimize and limit, monitor and control marine biological invasive and their impact on biodiversity, human health, and ecosystem servers. And there's a bunch of, let's say, sub-objective. The first one is to strengthen the capacity of the Mediterranean country to deal with the issue of alien species, to support regional information network for efficient exploitation of alien species data, and to support the regional policy and on biological invasion, to develop MAMIAS, our platform for collecting and dissemination of information on marine biological invasion, and I will show you exactly what is MAMIAS and the output of MAMIAS, to work on the institutional and legislative framework at level of the country, to conduct baseline study and establish monitoring program, and this is always in the framework of the ECAP, and also to elaborate guideline and other technical documentation. Next slide, please. Dora? Okay, so as another important step in the issue of invasive species is the adoption, as I said, of the ecosystem approach. The ecosystem approach is the adaptation of the marine strategy framework to the Mediterranean region. And since 2008, we defined an ecological vision of the Mediterranean, which call for a healthy Mediterranean with the marine and coastal ecosystem that are productive and biologically diverse for the benefit of present and future generation, and with the set of strategic goal, and also to develop a set of ecological objective corresponding to the vision and the strategic goal already identified. And one of the ecological objective is the non-indigenous species, the EU2, which says that non-indigenous species introduced by human activities are at level that do not adverse or alter the ecosystem. And this ecological objective was declined in what we call the Integrated Monitoring and Assessment Program. Next slide, please. Dora? So the Integrated Monitoring and Assessment Program, the IMAP, it lays down the principle for update of any existing national monitoring and assessment program, or develop a new one, following what we agreed as a common indicator. And the IMAP is the core of this program is what we call common indicator. And we have several common indicators for habitat, for the 12 ecological objective, and for the non-indigenous species, the ecological objective 2, we have one common indicator, which is the common indicator 6. It is a trend in abundance, temporal occurrence, and spatial distribution of non-indigenous species, particularly invasive non-indigenous species, notably in risk area. The monitoring of NIS is done following the risk-based approach, and it is done in hotspot area, for example, port and their surrounding area, docks, marina, aquaculture installation, heat power plant effluent side, offshore. But also, it is done in area of special interest, such as marine protected area or lagoon, And this is to make a sort of comparison between area with a high human activity with, let's say, a pristine site at national level, but also for any regional assessment. And the monitoring should be done once per year by country, as I said, in this hot spot area. And this is a very important step and in the conservation of biodiversity, because till now most of the monitoring and data collected are scattered and not continued in time, which make it difficult to make any real picture of the Mediterranean and its biodiversity and the pressure and the impact on it. And this with the IMAP that is declined on also in national monitoring program will facilitate the collection of data at regular time following the standard, and will allow us to make assessment at regional level and come back with the appropriate conservation measure. Next slide, please. Also, for the IMAP, and in order to monitoring invasive species, each contracting party is required to determine a list of non-indigenous species, particularly invasive ones, to be monitored within its national monitoring program, and to start collect data regarding these species in the hotspot area that I already mentioned. And you can see here guidance that we prepared to help the country to identify national list, and it could be downloaded on SPA RAC website. Next slide, please. Here are some technical tools that we developed under the implementation of the action plan. The first one is the vector of ant reduction in the Mediterranean, and this document is outdated, and we are trying now to update it with the new finding, but also to be aligned with the new standard that CBD adopted in this regard. And also we produced the guideline to assess the impact of the introduction of non-indigenous species, and also this should be updated in light with the new tools that are available. And also there's a new gathering that we are organizing each 3 years, is the symposia on the non-indigenous species. The first one, it was organized in January 2019, and here you have the proceeding of that symposium. And all these documents are available on SPA RAC website. Next slide, please. Here you just to show you main of the activity that SPA RAC is doing under the ECAP, but also in the implementation of the action plan concerning the species. Introduction is to help the Southern Mediterranean country to be in the same line with the European country that have more financial and human resources to undertake such activity. And we assisted Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Israel, and Lebanon to undertake their national monitoring program. And Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Lebanon, Cyprus, and Turkey to undertake their national action plan for the concerning species introduction and invasive species. And these two documents are complementary in a way that the action plan is more on a document to be addressed to the national agency in charge of the non-indigenous species to go forward on the legislative part, to organize national training session, or to provide awareness campaign. The monitoring program is mainly dedicated to the aspect of monitoring which species to monitor, which site, at what time, and with what protocols. Next slide, please. This is a preview for you are the first to see the new version of Mamias is not online yet. It will be online on the address you are in left. It is www.mamias.org. We are in the final test to release it online. It is it was first elaborated in 2012 following the provision of the updated action plan in order to collect information and disseminate it to the contracting party, because information on invasive species is one of the important and critical issue to allow us to have an eye on the real situation on the Mediterranean and in the country, but also to use it as a preamble for an early warning system to the whole Mediterranean, and to dedicate the necessary effort to eradicate any new arrival of non-indigenous species. And as you can see here, there's some figures. The Mamias is constituted of two core elements. The first one is a catalog. As you were aware, the issue of non-indigenous species, one of the critical issue is the taxonomy and the checklist. For that purpose, we created what we call a catalog that has to be in line with taxonomic reference. For marine species, we use worms. So all the species are verified through worms. So to get the exact species name, the authority, the taxonomy, and other useful information. And then the species that we have in the catalog are introduced in Mamias database with information concerning its statute, its establishment, the way of pathway of its introduction, and if we have national occurrence, and also if we have georeference occurrence. And that's why you have slightly different figure. For the catalog, we have more than 1,500 species, but in Mamias we have only almost 100 to 1,200 species. As a national occurrence, we have more than almost 400 reference, and for the time being, we have 36 georeferenced occurrence. And one of the important issue in this regard is that getting real georeferenced information for the invasive species is very important, but due to financial and human resources, and also for taxonomic reason, we are most focusing on only the invasive species to be monitoring and to try to get the georeferenced position. Next slide, please.
Sorry to intervene, Atif, because we are 6 minutes, now 7 minutes after schedule. So if I appreciate it if you can speed up it. Thank you.
Okay. Next. So next slide, please. Yes. Now this is data that we have collected and is up to date till 2020. The data is collected through first papers, published paper, gray literature, but also based on the communication by the country. Here you have, as you can see, and the trend of the introduction is still high, and the trend is, how can I say, is always we have a peak, and since 2016 we are experiencing a decline in the reporting of a new how can I say, reporting of a new non-indigenous species, but this is just an artifact because we are working on reported non-indigenous species. And there is a time between the real time of introduction and the time of reporting. And that's why the data could be biased. But the general trend is that it is an increasing trend since now the last 2 decades. Next slide, please. Here you have the number of reported needs by country, and you can see that the most impacted part of the Mediterranean are the oriental part and the Western Mediterranean. And you can see also that the number vary from country to country, and also is not shown here, but there's a pattern, difference pattern between country concerning the pathway of introduction. Next slide, please. And this is also to confirm that the oriental part, the eastern part, is the most affected. The second is the West Mediterranean. And this is a number of reported needs by ICA per sub-region. We need to get more information from country in order to differentiate between the different pathway by sub-region also. Next slide, please. Here you have a different figure that shows the most important introduced eco-functional group, and as you can see, there's the zoobanthos and which is the group that is the most introduced in the Mediterranean, and we can imagine the link with the ballast water is the kind of species that could be transferred easily with the ballast water. As the second graph shows that we have a lot of species from those introduced are established, and a few, let's say 6% are invasive, and the other we have a different type of establishment. Concerning the status of the species, mostly are non-indigenous species, and other are cryptogenic, with no defined evidence of their non-native or introduced status in the Mediterranean. Next slide, please. So here the first one, the first graph shows the origin of reported needs. As you can see that most of the reported non-indigenous species are from Indo-Pacific and Red Sea region. And in the second one is the number of reported needs by pathway and vector. And this is, let me first define two things. The first one is concerning pathway. The pathway is defined as a suite of processes that result in the introduction of non-indigenous species from one geographical location to another. And the vector is a dispersal mechanism and mean of introduction. In the Mediterranean, we know that there's many routes and mechanisms by which non-indigenous species arrive in the Mediterranean. Among the many important pathways by which human action have introduced non-indigenous species are shipping, by means of ballast water and hull fouling. And here you can see the percentage. Also through corridors, and mainly through Canal Suez, in particular for reception species, aquaculture, trade in marine organisms, and also there's a new, as you already know, that the global warming may enhance the spread of alien species. Shipping vessel, along with ballast water, ballast tank, anchoring, and fouling, are considered as a vector of as a vector of introduction, we consider that ship ballast water is of particular concern as a vector of introduction because of the large quantity of ballast water coming from different marine environments around the world being discharged at Mediterranean port. Ballast sediments are also of concern for management as they provide a substrate for a variety of marine species, notably fragile. The other issue concerning this graph and this information, we are trying now to be aligned with the CBD classification, because what we see here is the pathway vectors according to Holm and al. 2008. And this classification was adapted to various report and various paper, which result to non-unified system. That's why what we are, next slide, please. We will, in the next few months, try to get the information concerning the pathway in line with the CBD category adopted in 2014. And here you have the 5 that are concerned by the marine species, transport, stowaway. So the moving of organism by maritime transport through ballast water, fouling, and other, release in nature, escape from confinement, transport, contaminant, and corridor. Next slide, please. So these are key messages that were already identified in the MedQSR 2017. It was a report on the quality status report based on the data coming from the monitoring program. And as I showed, the corridor are the most important pathway of new introduction in the Mediterranean, followed by shipping and aquaculture. We have a considerable increase is noticeable in the trend of new indigenous species introduced in the Mediterranean Sea. Even we are getting decline in the number of reported since 2016, 2017. But as I said, this could be biased by the time between the real introduction date and the reporting date. There is a progress that has been made in creating national and regional inventory of non-indigenous species and assessing their pathway and impact. The other information that is still lacking in our data is the reported impact of alien species. Also, there is an important and crucial aspect which is related to the taxonomical expertise. So I think we can rely on new technology, and in particular the use of molecular approach that proved to provide reliable information. And we need, and this is very important, regular dedicated monitoring and long-time series to estimate trends in the possible future. And also we need to coordinate at national and sub-regional level concerning niche monitoring, because a species could be invasive in a region, but it is reported not invasive in another region. And share information between regions, this will facilitate monitoring. So there is a need for a better coordination, whether at national or at sub-national region. And you have a link for the MedQSR to have an idea about the 12 ecological objective and all the monitoring and indicator that were calculated, and the status of the Mediterranean in 2017. And thank you for your listening. And sorry for being so late for that.